So how are you guys? Oh, really? I don't believe you. How are you really? Blessed, grateful. Life is good. Great. Well, I'm delighted to be back. I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here. It's such a warm and welcoming community. And I don't know how many of you noticed the young man walking up here to the front to visit me 2 or 3 times, but I have my oldest grandson with me today. And he got to be a helper setting up. Spencer was kind enough to let him help set the welcome table. And so, and then Ross let him carry trees in and everything else. And so I think he has pretty much decided that he lives here. And you will probably be seeing him whether or not I'm here on any given Sunday, because he's already asked me if he can come back. So I'm just curious, how many sheroes do we have in the room? I'm not seeing any male hands. So the thing I want to tell you is that a mother is an archetype. That means that we all have that within us, that nurturing, loving, caring side. So let's try this again. How many sheroes are there in the room?
Come on, guys, keep praying.
Yeah. If you have ever touched the life of a young person, if you have ever supported someone in their life transition who's aging, if you have ever in any way contributed to the growth of another, you are exhibiting that archetype. So I feel well taken care for. I'd like you all to activate your nurturing, because I'm probably going to need it at some point this morning. I was looking through the internet and just getting some ideas about things about mothers. You know, there's a whole lot of platitudes, and then it seems like there's 2 ends of the spectrum. There's the mom is so awesome, and the oh my God, I had a witch, and you know, one of those sorts of things. One of my favorite quotes that I saw said, if your folks didn't have any children, don't worry, you probably won't either. Took me a minute. I'm like, what exactly does that mean? Another good one is an ounce of mother is worth a pound of clergy. So I'm kind of concerned that my children are now feeling a little stressed by that, you know, with both of those. The best way to keep children at home is to make it a pleasant environment and let the air out of their tires. As they get older, we kind of sometimes want to do that. Aristotle even talked about mothers. He said, mothers are fonder than fathers of their children because they're more certain that they're theirs. And the Vatican, I was in part of my talk, there's a reference to a Jewish man who had some influence on the Vatican, which is not easy to do. And so I was looking up things relative to the Vatican, and I discovered that the Vatican is against surrogate mothers, but Elaine Boozler says, good thing they didn't have that rule when Jesus was born, right? So who would we have learned how to walk on water from, right, if Jesus wasn't around? So last week, Carol Wilkie, who is here, blessings, began this 2-part series, and she did a wonderful talk on yes to walking on water. The subtitle of her talk was, if you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat. That comes from a book by a man named John Ortberg, who wrote a book of the same title. And that's kind of a given, right? If you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat. So she spoke to us about a number of things. Her emphasis was on intention, how we tap into our true calling in life, and then what it takes to develop the courage to actually step into that and stand in that. And I'm going to just run through her high points, because if you weren't here, I'm not going to give it away. Really, I would invite you to listen to the talk. It was quite well done, and there were some things in there that have stuck with me all week long, some actions and things that we were called to. But part of this is context also for today, so I am going to run through a few key things. Carol talked about the fact that living in our intentions requires that we understand what the boat represents to us. So when you think about stepping out of the boat, what do you think of? What is that boat? You know, it can be things that hold you back. It can be attachments that you still have, right? It can be stories that you make up. You're all looking at me kind of holy, like you don't do that. Just I make up stories? No, Natalie makes up stories, I can see it. You know, things that we hold on to that no longer serve us because they're familiar. Things along that line. And then understanding what it takes to step out of the boat. The notion of walking on water kind of goes against everything we know about natural law, doesn't it? Yeah, you're going to walk on water. You got to find the rocks. You got to, you know, I mean, we go right immediately into our materialistic mind, and we know there's got to be solidity there. But if we take it into a metaphorical sense, what is solidity, really? Is it the things we can see, or is it that which we can't see? And how do we navigate between the two of those things? And then she talked about how we can do things that seem impossible by activating a clear intention, by understanding what our intention is, activating that from a deep place, and then allowing miracles to unfold, miracles from the human point of view, but actually natural essence to express itself in a dynamic and powerful way. So we got three tools last week, and they were kind of couched also kind of in the realm of homework, things that we could do to prepare as we choose to step it out of the boat. First off, I think you got to decide, are you saying yes to walking on water or not? Because you're always at choice, right? Don't we live in a creative universe? We can say yes or no to anything we want. All it does is impact our experience. So if you're not so sure you want to go walking on water, you don't have to. But if you decide you want to, then some of the things that you need to do are to start by tapping into what is it that keeps you from stepping out of the boat? What's in your way? Got some sort of ginormous life jacket and a baggage full of stuff that you're hauling with you from the past life that might make you sink? What is it that's keeping you from stepping out of the boat? So get clear about that. Spend a little time with, gosh, I just feel really some resistance here. What's that about? What's that about for me? And then listen to your heart and notice what's creating joy. Where are the joy buttons for you? What makes you go, and then the yeah buts start. But before the yeah buts, what is that thing that makes you kind of go, wow, what do I want to do with that? And then commit each week, and this time it was this week, commit to do one thing that represents to you taking a step towards stepping out of the boat. And so if you engaged in that activity, I want you to bring forward whatever that thought was. And if you didn't have a chance to do that, or you weren't here last week, I just want to invite you to close your eyes for just a moment. Take a deep breath. And allow yourself just to feel into the center of your being. Just let yourself feel that deep stillness. And from this place, just allow the idea of what it is that's ready to be released for you. What is it that you're ready to step into to come forward? And when you have a sense of that, you're welcome to come on back into the room. So saying yes to walking on water involves stretching our comfort zone a little bit, right? A little bit. And being willing to stand in the awe and wonder of uncertainty. How many people sign up for that on a daily basis? Oh, really? I want to be insecure. Yeah, some of us do sign up for the awe and wonder of uncertainty, right? Because that's where the creative aspect happens, right? That's where it is. That's where it is. That's totally where it is. Mark Nepo is a fabulous poet and philosopher, and he says, meeting each uncertainty with an open heart is what will lead us into an authentic tomorrow. Meeting each uncertainty. It doesn't say if you happen to meet uncertainty, because we're going to meet uncertainty. So it's how we take it up that actually is going to help lead us into an authentic way of being and creating that future that we're all waiting for, because we're it, right? So I really believe that at this point in time, humanity is actually called to a deeper authenticity, a deeper connection, a deeper ability to stand in and embody the principle of oneness and quit just talking about it. You know, it's a lofty ideal. It really is. It's a principle, it's a spiritual truth that there is just one life and we are all that. But how do you live it when they're cutting you off on the freeway? Right? How do you live it when they won't go to bed on time? That's been my struggle this weekend as my son's been out of town and I've had Gage. Last night he's up going, can we do this? I'm like, no, we can't. You know, but there's times I don't want to go to bed either. How do we live it when we're faced with challenges? How do we live it when we're grieving? How do we live it when we're overwhelmed and tired? That's the question. I really believe that it comes down to a willingness to stretch and open our hearts and engage in some radical self-care. So what I want to explore today in this context of yes to walking on water is I want us to dive a little deeper into the yes. Take it a little bit step back and say, what is that yes? Because if you're going to decide to walk on water, it means you decided. It means some part of you decided somewhere. So what went into that decision? What is that yes all about for you? So the subtitle of today's talk is a quality yes, not a qualified yes. Because if we're going to say yes, and here are my criteria, I need to have this, I need to have that, I need to have some water wings, and they need to like match my hair, and all these other things, that's not really an open-hearted yes. But when we say yes, what is it we're saying yes to, and why are we saying yes to that? So taking the same story, we're going to pick up the story of Peter stepping out of the boat and walking on water, and go from there. So some of you know that I have a Christian background and have a lot of years in a fundamental organization, and Bible stories were incredibly important to us. We used them a lot for teaching, lots of Bible stories. So the teaching around this particular story often starts pretty much at the point where, Peter steps out of the boat and then within moments begins to sink. And the whole point of that teaching was drilled home to me as a kid about the fact that, it's really important to keep your eyes focused on God, because if you don't, you're going to sink. That's not a bad point, but I don't think it's the first point that the story points up for us. So let's start with the context. We're going to take a look at a little bit of the subtleties. So contextually, what's happening in this story is that the disciples are in a boat. They're in the middle of the lake. It's a very big body of water, so it's not like they can just hop out and walk to the shore. They're out in the center. It is incredibly stormy. There are waves crashing over the top of this boat. It's a small boat. They're being rocked. They're scared. It's the middle of the night. And suddenly they look up and they see Jesus walking on the water. They're not sure it's Jesus. They think it's a ghost. Either way, they're flipped out a little bit. Don't you think? So they weren't wimpy, though. It's important to think, these big bad fishermen, bad fishermen, pull out nets all the time. No, they're not doing that. But there is this sense of, oh my goodness. Now, I had to put myself in their shoes and realize, I'd probably be flipping a little bit too. I think I would have been flipped before I even saw the thing on the water, and that would have just kind of kicked me over the edge. But mystics of all traditions talk about numinous experiences being both awe-inspiring, wonderful, and terrible, and overwhelming, and terrifying. And everything in the Bible is metaphorical. So in this case, the disciples are representative of our human self, our human nature, parts of us. And Jesus is representative of the Christ nature, the principle of oneness, the deeper part of us that is that one life in form. So really what's happening here is that the disciples, the human side, is having an interaction with the spiritual side, and it's a numinous experience. It's a little bit awe-inspiring. Mystics describe it, no matter what faith tradition they're from, they describe it as feeling very much like you are so clear that you're in the presence of something so much larger than you, and that you are so teeny, and yet that you are so very connected. That's what's happening in the first few minutes of this experience. Science of Mind teaches 10 core concepts. We can boil our teaching down into 10 core concepts. Number 10 is the Christ consciousness. And the Christ consciousness is that essential nature. It's a universal principle. It is not a person. It's not a thing. It is a presence. It's the universal oneness, the source of all that is. So that's what's happening here. Marianne Williamson puts it in more colloquial terms in a quote that you have probably heard before. This is from her book, A Return to Love. She says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us." Have you ever glimpsed a part of your higher self and found it a little bit disconcerting, if not completely terrifying, right? It's like, you want me to do what? No, that's not me, right? So it might be interesting to play with the question of what overwhelmed you? What feels scary? What makes you want to go, oh, that's not me. That's somebody else. Because chances are the answers to those questions are going to take you closer to your own purpose and your own call here on the planet this time. So the disciples were afraid and they cried out. Now that's not unlike parts of our personalities, right? We have all these subparts of our personalities. Carl Jung mapped a lot of these different parts and talks about the fact that, we've got an overall personality that forms that helps protect us and all of this as we go through life. But then there's these little other pieces. So, you have a driver, you might have a wimp, you might have a mother figure, you might have a hero. Any of those kinds of things are just parts of us. Now, and a lot of those parts get developed in response to an emotional experience we have at a young age, or at any age, but they often start developing at a young age when we don't exactly know what to do with it, but we feel unsafe. So then something steps forward with a sword, and now it's going to do this. And every time we see something that triggers that kind of feeling, we react in that kind of way. And those become part of our operating program, kind of like in your computer. You're not at all aware of what all's going on in the background, right? When it's on, it's either on or it's not. You're focused on the program you're working with. This is the same kind of thing. It's operating subconsciously underneath us. So this is what the disciples are representing here. So if we get an inspiration and we all of a sudden get a glimpse of our deeper selves, the voices immediately begin, don't they? Oh yeah, but we could never. I can't afford. How could that possibly be, right? Anybody else have mind chatter? Mm-hmm. That's what this is. These are the parts of us that are tasked with trying to keep us safe. They're trying to keep us safe. So fighting them, shoving them down, putting them back in a closet and holding the door shut is really not conducive to integrating them into your wholeness. What we need to do is learn to hear them, recognize what they're about, stand with them in the place they're in, and allow ourselves to love them back into wholeness by recognizing we are so much more than we thought we were when that was formed. Right? So this has been an experience for me. I'll just share a little bit about myself at the moment relative to this. Ever since I was a little teeny kid, I was really aware that there's so much more to life than we can see. I could feel it. I could see it. I could see auras. I could see auras around trees. I just knew everything was connected. Didn't have a lot of words around it. I was kind of a strange little kid. But I was really, really sure of this. I started having a recurring dream when I was quite young, and it was about me standing up and talking to people and writing things and just being in a space of talking about God and talking about personality and telling people cool things and exploring ideas and talking to animals and recognizing life and everything. And, that was fine when I was little. It was actually inspiring. I used to remember waking up and feeling this sensation in my belly that felt a little like butterflies and thinking something exciting is going to happen today. And it always did. I could just feel it. Something exciting is going to happen today. As I got older, I started to learn more and develop more conditioning and learn more about how I should protect myself and that, you don't talk about yourself that way and you don't think about yourself that way and really how are you going to get the training for that? And all these different things started coming up. And so that dream, even though it repeats periodically at night, it began to fade into the background for me because it was, it wasn't real. Well, it's actually never gone away. It's actually been coming out more, and as I began to wake up to the essence of who I am, it started showing up in things like visioning, and other spiritual practices, meditations, things like this. And it's only been in the last 10 years that I've even been willing to look at it because it was just a little too scary. Just a little too scary. A little too much like some weird thing walking on the water that I can't even imagine, don't want. I was afraid to be visible for a really long time. That was one of my coping skills, was just to recede into the woodwork. It's only been in about the last 5 years that I've actually been willing to acknowledge it and start to play with it a little bit and just say, what if? It's only been in the last 3 years that I've begun to engage with it and to surrender to it and recognize that, you know what? When I let go of the story, there's a whole lot of joy under there. There's a whole lot of playful what if under there. And now I'm learning to stand in and tap into that a little bit more. So we ask ourselves, Marianne Williamson says, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? But actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. So what if we believe that? So close your eyes, if you're comfortable. I want you to take a deep breath. I'm going to read it again, and I want you to feel the words. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, to be gorgeous, to be talented, to be fabulous, to be a speaker, to be a writer, to sing, to teach. Who am I to travel? Who am I to speak out? Who am I to love others? Who am I to whatever your dream is? Actually, feel into this. Who are you not to? You are a child of God. There is one life. That one life is perfect. That one life is whole and complete. That one life I call God. And that one life is my life and your life right here, right now. There is nothing else we could be made from. Just isn't. Come on back whenever you're ready. What if we believed that? What if we acted on it? What if we stepped out and said, okay, I am not the whole of God. I'm not confused about that. I am not the whole of God. But there is nothing else from which I could be made. I am wholly that same powerful life in unique manifest form. Getting to choose how I show up. What inspires me is spirit as me saying, oh, let's try this. Oh, what if we step into that? Huh, that's never been done before. Or, ooh, that person looks like they're having fun. I'd love to be a high wire walker. Yeah, not me really, but you know. That's God as us wanting to experience itself. So just what if we made room for the idea that we could actually step into that and start making choices from that perspective? If we stop using our life force and our incredible intellect, which is really developed well, to argue for limitations, then we're going to be just like the disciples and immediately hear the truth. Because the minute they cried out, Jesus immediately responded and said, it's me. It's me. Don't be afraid. When the inner parts, the human parts begin to be fearful and cry out, the essential nature said, it's me. Right here. There's no way you could be alone because we're all connected. We're all one and you're safe. So I'd invite you to listen deeply and ask yourself, what is it I know? Go beyond the words. What is it I know? In fact, the information you gain, the insight you gather may not be words at all. It may be things like colors or images. Or I have a friend who turns on her iPod whenever she doesn't know what to do next. She turns it on and she gets all this direction from the song list that plays. Half the time it's on Pandora. On her computer, she'll play that. And just songs after song after song will just come up and it'll be exactly the message she needs. The universe always meets us exactly where we are with whatever tool we choose to access. In the moment, we're never, ever left without an answer. And a non-answer is usually an invitation to explore the question, do I have an attachment to what the answer should be? Look at you all. We never do that. You know, if it doesn't look like the answer I thought, then perhaps the answer I thought is not the answer. Perhaps I have tried to put myself unknowingly into a box that I don't really mean to be in, because there's a deeper part of me that has a different opinion. So I just want to leave you, we're not done, don't get excited, but I'm going to give you 3 different things that you can remember if you choose, as you continue to explore why you say yes and how you're saying yes to things. So the first is to ask yourself the question, what am I pretending not to know? What am I pretending not to know? Because I pretend to not know a lot of stuff, and then when things happen, I'm like, I knew that. At some level, there's this whole cacophony of things going, we're dancing, don't look, or whatever. And I'm thinking I didn't know, but truth is I knew. And I ended up going there anyway, so what am I pretending not to know, and what would it be like if I gave up trying to fight with that? So the next thing that happens after Jesus assures the disciples, their teeth continue to chatter, I'm fairly sure, but they heard. Peter then immediately speaks up and he says, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you. Now, in this case, Peter represents the physical self and the larger personality, the primary personality, the primary ego. The disciples represent more of the subparts, okay? So this primary personality develops so that we can function in the world. It's part of what helps keep us safe in the world and all of this sort of thing. I think it's probably important for me to articulate that I am not a therapist and I am not a clinically trained doctor or anything along this line, but I do have training in guided imagery and a number of different Jungian techniques, and I have certification in a couple of things, so I'm a trained professional, at least enough to stand up here and say, this is kind of what's happening here, but I don't want you to take this as any kind of gospel truth because we all get to interpret what calls it for us, right? So, but the primary personality is there to keep us safe, and it's how we show up in the world. It's who you know me as Kathy, and I know you as Barb, in this way. And that personality, when it's met with anything new, frequently will respond with either testing it or a yeah, but. Yeah, but not so sure. So Peter's doing that here. He's testing, isn't he? Lord, if it's really you, if it's really you, if it's really you. And I have to tell you, I think that's brilliant. I think it's brilliant that he said that. I don't think he's challenging God. First off, I don't think God is threatened by our need to ask questions. I really don't. I don't think that the power that hung the moon and the stars has any issue with my asking a question. I'm really pretty sure it's confident about that. But the universe is also a holograph, and the whole is contained within every part. And that means that the answer always lies within the question. Always. Always, always. Just like the seed for the tree lies within the acorn. The answer is always there. So asking a question is a good way to reveal an answer. And from a biological and a neurological point of view, the brain, the human brain, fires on questions. So if you're trying to get someone's attention, if you ask a question, if they've been daydreaming, they're right back. Our brain fires on questions. So in this case, if we ask a question of our deeper nature, we're invoking both and activating both our intuition and our intellect to work together, which they don't often do, unless we consciously set that up. That's kind of cool, huh? But the other thing I want you to notice about this is that Peter didn't respond to Jesus. He initiated this experience. Now, how much you want to bet he's going, what are you thinking? Really? If it's you, I'll come on out. You know, there's got to be a part of him inside of him going, stop talking. You know? Have you ever done that? You hear yourself and you're like, what are you thinking? Just stop, just stop. That was your out loud voice. The truth of the matter is, I don't think he was thinking at all. I think he heard that statement the same time everybody else did. I think it was an inner impulse. I think it was that part of him that just absolutely responded to truth and was responding before his ego self had a chance to catch up. Right? That is a yes. The yeses that support us most deeply are those that are in alignment with our heart call. Peter had a strong heart call to follow God. Many of us have that strong heart call to live to the potential of who we've come to be. And that's going to supersede our intellect at times. Thank goodness. And then they can learn to work together. Ernest Holmes put it this way. He says, deep calls unto deep and deep answers. And when I first heard that, I'm like, okay, that is so Holmesian. I mean, like, what does that even mean? But I've really learned to love that saying. Deep calls unto deep and deep answers. The deeper part of me calls unto the deeper part of you, and the deeper part of you responds. There's this continual exchange of flow and information between our spirit selves all the time, because they're not separate. You recognize truth when you see it, right? You recognize truth when you hear it. You recognize grace when it's in action. Have you ever had just a beautiful piece of music make you cry? And then you find out later that it's just the heart song of the person who was playing it? That's what that is. Deep calls into deep, and deep answers. I've had the privilege, I have 7 grandchildren, and I just learned this week I have one more on the way. Yay. Yes. So they don't all live with me, just. But I have had the privilege of meeting all 7 of the ones that are here so far within the first hour of their birth, which I can't even tell you what a gift that was. And with the very first one, who's the little man that you saw here, Gage, I intuitively picked him up and just opened my heart, because I was so filled with joy, and just said, welcome. And just, I knew that he couldn't, understand English, and he wasn't going to have a dialogue, but I just wanted his being to feel that I knew him, that he was welcome. He opened his eyes, literally, looked right into my eyes, totally held my gaze, and I held his, and I was looking into the essence of him. And I could feel him looking into the essence of me. And a nurse in the room went, I have never seen a baby do that long. And do you know what has happened with every single one of them? Deep calls unto deep, and deep answers. They know who they are. They're not confused by the little body. They need us to know who they are too. Core concept 10, back to that, the Christ nature. Each person experiences this Christ nature to the degree we recognize it and live our lives from that revelation. It's not enough to recognize it. We start to experience it when we choose to live from that place. When we choose to play what if of, oh, what if that is me? What if I am allowed to be fabulous? What if I am being called? What if this deeper cry is not too much pizza? Really, what if this is actually something intrinsic that's wanting to express through and as me? And what if there's a way, even though I don't know what the how looks like? There's a man who I'm going to butcher his name, I'll just say that up front. He was the Secretary General in the 60s. Dag Hammarskjöld is how the internet told me to say it. Dag Hammarskjöld, he was Swedish. He was a UN Secretary General, and President Kennedy referred to him as the greatest statesman of our time. And in his diary of reflections, which was called Markings, he said, I don't know who or what put the question. I don't know when it was put. I don't even remember answering. But at some moment, I did answer yes to someone or something. And from that hour, I was certain that existence was meaningful, and that therefore my life in self-surrender had a goal. And he lived his life from that moment on like that. He won a Nobel Prize and made huge differences in the world. He was on his way to a ceasefire peace talks when his plane went down, and that's how he exited. But he attributed that to the seed of why he stepped into what he did, because he wasn't trained, wasn't schooled, wasn't raised to believe that he was going to be a world-class leader. To discover this, he had to listen to something he couldn't see, and he had to trust the certainty of his knowing to take those steps and to keep moving forward, right? And he did that. And that's no different than what we're being asked to do every moment. Every time we get an impulse, that's what we get to do. We get to take a look and say. Peter didn't ask for the opinions of the disciples. Hey, what do you think? Should I get out of the boat? What do you guys think if I make this offer? He didn't. He just did it. Because as soon as Jesus said, come, what? He stepped out, right? Stepped right out. This man did the same thing. He didn't ask permission. He just had to know, had to move with what he knew. He was focused on his inner guidance. So the next question I'd like to ask is, how often do you make decisions? How often do we make decisions in alignment with our essential nature? You know, Abraham, who's channeled by Esther Hicks, says, people call us selfish when we do what we desire, because they want us to do what they desire. Yeah, when the shoe's on the other foot, not so selfish, right? Yeah, so consider, how often do you make decisions on what other people need? And the question you can ask yourself is, whose permission am I seeking and why? Whose permission am I seeking and why? Marianne goes on to say that your playing small does not serve the world, and there's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We're all meant to shine as children do. Now, in the reflection for preparing for this talk, I realized that an authentic yes doesn't come from enough data, a lot of opinions, certain kind of a poll, having the right schooling or the right training or anything along that line. Have you ever noticed you can have all the data you need, and if it's an important decision, you just need a little more? Just a little bit more. Just want to ask one more opinion. What do you think, Trace? Really? You know, it's that kind of a thing. We need this reassurance. You can know that when you're doing that, that's not coming from an authentic yes. That's coming from a conditioned yes, right? Your authentic yes is actually something that's always calling you from your essential self. And then I got it. Yes, your essential self. Oh, that's kind of simple because I was thinking, wow, how am I going to remember that? Well, maybe like this. Yes, your essential self. So when I feel something pulling that has a little bit of a to it, chances are it's worth paying attention to. And as we awaken and choose to step into unfolding to being that spirit that we are, expressing as only we can on this planet at this time, perhaps listening for those essential yeses is actually what's going to keep us safe, not trying to use our life energy to say all the reasons why we're not really that. And then we can step out of the boat and see what it's like to walk on water. So when Peter first starts taking his steps, he immediately starts to sink, and this is the part where he usually takes heat, right? Okay, loser, couldn't even, stay up there and walk very, very far or whatever. But when we look deeper into this experience, he got out, he's walking, he's taking steps, and then he starts to sink. It could have been the cacophony of fearful voices from his subparts. It could have been, or the disciples in this case, it could have been any number of things that was coming up for him about that. But actually, what I see is a beautiful demonstration of the interplay between our human and spirit selves when we do say we're going to live from that revelation. That Christ consciousness, that universal presence, that principle, that all that is who we are. And our human self starts to practice and to step in and partner with our essential self. And he did not revert to his human pattern. He didn't immediately flip on his back and start breathing. He didn't. He didn't start doing the breaststroke. He didn't start treading water. What did he do? What we're told he did is he intensified his cry for support immediately, Lord, help me. He turned directly to that which he was reaching for and let it lift him up. And he was immediately lifted, transported to the boat. Now he's back with all his subparts and his essential natures in the boat too. They're all standing there together, and guess what? All the wind stopped. And it's done. And there's a chance for integration and experience of having stepped out and taken a few more steps than he had taken before. And then his essential nature, this time represented as Jesus, spoke up and said, don't focus on the circumstances. Keep your eye on where you're headed. So what if we were actually to believe that we are called and that we are that, and that the universe meets us right where we are all the time because there's nowhere else for it to be? Nobody moved. We just simply shut off our awareness briefly. When we say yes, why do we say no? When we mean yes, why do we say no? Why do we say yes when we mean no? And for those of us who have hearts of service, which I doubt you would be in this room if that wasn't you in some fashion, we've been conditioned in this culture to think that we're supposed to say yes to everyone else before we say yes to ourselves. But I would invite you to consider the fact that the power comes in saying authentic yeses, which always involve knowing what's yours to do. And you're only going to stand on water and do things that feel and seem impossible if you are able to stand in an authentic place, knowing that there's the bigger part of you, that awe-inspiring, numinous part of you is what's doing the calling. So I invite you to activate your sense of wonder. I wonder what it would be like if I said no this time. I wonder what it would be like if I said yes this time. I wonder what it would be like to take the next step without knowing what the outcome is. I wonder what it would be like to stand in the awe and wonder of uncertainty and be okay with that. That's how you walk on water. Saying yes, according to Mark Nepo, is the bravest way to keep leaning into life. And I believe we're here to express. Let's pray.